And it is the HRPS that really supports CCH and the community for the entire other 11 months out of the year. This, you can see, is the Black History Month flag. And these are just images from 2021 to 2023. And that flag is one that the Halton Regional Police System has really taken on. And it is flown at each one of the detachments throughout the entire region. It's also flown, as Chairman Noel will tell you, at the town of Oakville as well. And we have a huge flag unveiling and an event around that, and Chief Tanner and his leadership has really done well with that. Here are images between 2020 and 2023 where CCH has been partnering on these lunch and learn sessions with the Halton Regional Police Service. It also includes key community leaders that the Chief has invited that are people from the other organizations that are leaders in those individual communities at the Chief's Diversity Equity Table. And you'll see in the top right-hand corner that there is Caroline Schmart-Frost. She's a noted historian. And last year, for the first time, not only did she do a presentation for the Halton Regional Police Service Lunch and Learn, but that presentation that she did was adopted by the service and was put on their portal and served as a training piece for a number of months thereafter. Here's an example of our ongoing direct promotion to support organizations. It's a letter that is inserted in our Black History Month kickoff, but also a number of different other types of events that we have where we have booklets and promotional items. The Chief has not only supported us for this Black History Month kickoff, which has been circulated amongst you there, but also the service promotes us in their letters of support for our grant applications. And as we evolved as an organization from, say, event projection advertising to our direct mail newsletters, and now social media and Cogeco cable broadcast, the HRPS is always prominently featured.
I'm going to talk about the Youth Leadership Program. We've been in this room many, many, many times. I think we're one of the first events when the facility opened here. Again, my name is Richard Pinnock. I'm on the board of CCH. Our Youth Leadership Program this year will be in our 16th year. It was created based on the collaboration between Maureen Brown and the CCH, and in the 2003 report, Growing Up Black in Oakville. This report became the basis of the 2022 Belonging and Racial Identity in Halton report that was just recently released. So we started in person with about 10 to 15 youth, and Andrew's dad, Lloyd, he would have to go in his car and literally drag these youth out of bed on a Saturday to get your self down here. So we used to have 10, 12, 15 youth. We then partnered with the school boards. Next part of the strategy was to grow to about 50 students in person, again, in a lot of the facilities with the police. We'd have 479 applicants, so we tried to make sure all the high schools were covered because we had a capacity. When we had COVID, we pivoted to a virtual format in 2020. We had 150 students, and we did that session 4 times, so a total of 600 participants. Then we increased the next year, in 2021, we had 240 students participating in 3 sessions at 750 youth. For those that like the numbers, our finance people, those are good numbers, right? Then we introduced a streaming component. So we had 65 students here in the room, plus we did that 2 times, plus a virtual stream that went out to about 300 students. And it's not random. We have a thing called a virtual roll call, where right now you have to go into a website and enter what we call a roll call code. So if you don't enter the code, you're not getting your volunteer hours, kind of thing. So that's an interesting innovation that we did that qualified for volunteer hours with the school boards. Finally, this year, we're exploring opportunity to produce a 60-minute cable TV segment on youth leadership, of course, in partnership with HRPS. And we're looking to not only do our programming, but have that broadcast, and our anticipated number of participants is 3,000.
This is our summer camp youth engagement. The demand for this innovative program continues to grow. We have 40 racialized families that have children attend 5 days per week for 8 weeks over the summer. The town of Oakville that we partner with in delivering this program has valued each one of those spots at $500 a week. And the entire budget for this program is $110,000. What is the cost to those families to put their kids in this program?
To do this today? Zero.
It's zero. Absolutely free. Under Chief Tanner's leadership, the Halton Regional Police Service is really embedded in our program. So you'll see there on the left, you've got a handsome gentleman there, Ryan Smith. He did a training session with the camp counselors on hate crime and among a number of other things. And Ryan is also the delegated staff person for the CCH Board of Directors. So every year, the chief delegates a staff person to serve on the CCH Board of Directors.
Here we have images from 2020, 21, and 22 for our Emancipation Day engagement. So this has been going on for quite some time, over the last 15 years. This will be the 4th year that we're including Milton in our activities. The HRPS proactively planning early is going to be a call to action that we're looking for, so we can make the Milton leg as exciting and as big as possible. We need to decide how we can include HRPS into the Milton program by the end of April.
So we're really looking at the collaboration that we have with HRPS in some of these areas, Burlington, Oakville, to really move northward as well. The Black Heritage Cruiser, in front of a place that I'm sure that you all know there, film.ca. CCH was involved in sponsoring this HRPS Black Community Cruiser design. We continue to partner to ensure that the cruiser is visible when hosting public events and to have the officers engage with community participating. Everything from our marquee community concerts to events such as Emancipation Day, and even that summer engagement camp that you saw. Looking forward, we have the cruiser already booked at an April 30th choral event, May 13th Mother's Day event, June 11th the Steel Pan recital that we have at Queen Elizabeth Park Community and Cultural Center. So looking forward, we really want to showcase that cruiser. We really want to engage with the community. And I have just a brief 60-second video for you that kind of summarizes what the CCH is doing, and it's here to help people who struggle, and for those who aren't, really give them a sense of belonging. So here we go. We have volume?
Yeah, we have to turn the audio up on the computer here.
Okay, could you do that?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Just turn it on.
Can we restart the video from scratch?
I'm here for any questions, but I just really want to bring home the fact that the Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton, although it is a Black-led organization, and it's made up of Black membership, it's not only Black serving, it embraces the entire community, and it does so well and has been doing so for the last 46 years, and we're happy to continue doing that.
Thanks, Andrew. Members of the board, do you have any questions for Andrew or Richard this morning? Ingrid, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, thank you for that great presentation. I had no idea that the association started 46 years ago, and I'm sure there were many challenges that you and your team had to meet in order to bring it to today's level. What do you see in the future? What are some of the challenges for the continuous growth of the association?
Thank you for that question. It's a great question. I think that for any registered charity such as the CCH, the answer, the short answer, the quick answer would be funding. But we are making inroads. We are supported by all levels of the government, the municipal government, Halton Regional Community Investment Fund, the town of Oakville, the federal government, and the provincial government. And as we're getting our word out, we are getting more donations from the general public as well. So that's good. We'd like to see our programs grow in that starting September, we have a 1-hour Black History movie that we're shooting over the summer that will be embedded in the curriculum of both of the school boards. This year, for Black History Month, we had Jean Augustine's documentary that we screened to both school boards as well as Appleby College, and we had the engagement of 976 students. So those are the kinds of things that we will be doing as we move forward, and that's where I see the growth potential, is being embedded in a lot of those other organizations and really capitalizing on those synergies.
It's wonderful you have such wonderful support throughout the community.
Thank you.
We wish you well for the future.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the support that the board has given us.
Yes, worth pointing out that for new members of the board, but also for those who may not recall, the Halton Police Board, through our Community Trust Fund, has been providing financial support to CCH for a few years now, and we know that the money goes to very good use in just scratching the surface, really, and covering the costs of these programs. But it's been a meaningful contribution that we've been making to help the organization get to the point here today. Kurt, you're up next, sir.
I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you for the presentation. My question is more around, you mentioned a list of chiefs, but it was a short list of chiefs, really. When we look at Ontario and we look at Canada. I'm interested in knowing if you have ideas about how we can help lengthen that list of chiefs. Because that's not good news, I guess, that there were, half a dozen or so, but really, there are a lot of others. And I was sitting here wondering if there's a way that our board might help sharing information with other boards. I don't know. I can't speak for the board, but I'm interested in your ideas.
Well, thank you. We're the Canadian Association of Halton, so our mandate is just Halton. But at the same time, we do get a number of inquiries every year from other jurisdictions, other organizations looking to replicate our programs and looking to replicate our success. And that's where we see that we have a role to play in pushing out some of these programs, the framework, the template of some of these programs so that other organizations and other jurisdictions can engage their police chief and really bring in the sense of community that we have fostered here in Halton. It's not just by coincidence. It's under the leadership of those chiefs that have really endorsed community policing here in Halton. I can tell you that I've traveled Canada as I was a police service board member, and I've interacted with a number of other police agencies, and Halton Regional Police Service and community policing is really the beacon for other service organizations throughout Canada. So what you have here should not be taken for granted.
If I may just add on to that, Andrew, the Association of Police Chiefs, for example, we'd be more than happy to attend maybe and talk. I find in my observation, HRPS is very humble, and maybe there's an opportunity to reach out more and help other jurisdictions understand, what you're doing. Having a presentation like this would be something that we could easily do.
Is your success shared? I understand your Halton, but there's really no fence around Halton. So is your success known, and the Halton Regional Police Services success in working with you known widely?
I don't think so. I think that we have an opportunity that we could broadcast that. And to your point, now with the Building Safer Communities, we all know that criminals don't abide by those boundaries.
No.
So we do have an opportunity now to move outward, and I think that we should take that on. Some of the things that Richard was talking about, maybe our presentation, the things that we're doing can really be broadcast to other communities so they could do the same in them.
I think there's lots of opportunities, no matter how we address it, and if we can do it together.
I'm sure that the chief can take your suggestion, Richard, back to the OACP to talk about bringing this presentation or similar presentation at that level, but we could certainly do that to the OAPSB, which is the Association of Police Service Boards. Probably too late for this meeting coming up in May, but certainly it's something we could bring out as a board and suggest a presentation that perhaps you folks could lead. With perhaps whoever, maybe for EDI at that level, maybe we could start spreading good news and the success program to other police service boards across Ontario. So that we'll undertake that through Fred will talk to the folks at APSB and see if that can be facilitated.
I think there's also the GAPG.
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
Which might be able to play a role. That's national. And there's a conference coming up from St. John's, Newfoundland, I think this coming fall. Maybe, I think there are opportunities in getting to finding the road.
And you have to be on the board of that organization, will you?
I do, yes.
So maybe you could talk to them.
Maybe I could.
That's a great suggestion.
So you in Newfoundland.
All right, thank you for having us.
Before you step out, is there any other questions from the board today?
I just wanted to say one thing. With social media, and you say that you're on that quite a bit. Do you take other jurisdictions with what you're doing so they can see what you're doing? I just thought it was another avenue.
Yes, we do. We tag other organizations that are in Peel and in Hamilton, and you raise social media. There was a 1-minute greeting that Chief Tanner did for Black History Month, and that's been constantly running on social media, as well as other of our political representatives as well. So that really goes to show the support that we have, and we try and broadcast that as much as we can. We're only new to social media, but we're growing, and as we grow, so will that word out to all of the rest of the world.
One last call. Any further questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. So on behalf of the board, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
You're always welcome to come and talk to us if you have issues of concern or topics you wish to bring to our attention. We really appreciate your work in the community, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Okay, members of the board, I want to draw your attention to item 2.2, which is the public complaints process, and I believe that Inspector Glenn Vanilla is going to be leading us here. Ken Clark, I apologize. Ken Clark behind the podium. We need a transparent podium. transparency here at the Halton Police Board. Yeah.
Good morning. Inspector Manola and I have been asked to come before you today to talk to you about the role of the Police Services Board in the public complaints process. I want to warn you at the start, this is a very dry topic, but hopefully it'll give you some insight into key areas of your mandate and how it intersects with the public complaints process itself. So I know you're all familiar what your mandate is, but for the viewers at home, what role does the board play in terms of police oversight? The board is a civilian body that oversees the Halton Regional Police Service. The board ensures the effective management of the police service and establishes objectives and priorities for the police service in consultation with the chief of police. The board directs the chief through policy, and the chief implements or operationalizes the board's direction. The board monitors compliance with legislation with board directives through recording requirements for the chief. There are 4 areas that the board exercises its civilian oversight in relation to public complaints. First is the board must establish guidelines for dealing with public complaints under Part 5 of the Police Services Act and to monitor the chief's administration of that system. The board is also required under the Act to review complaints against the chief or deputy chiefs when those complaints are referred to them by the OIPRD and to make determinations based on its review. If the board finds that this misconduct is serious, it must hold a hearing or refer the matter back to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, or OCPC. The board is also responsible for review of the chief's disposition of police policy complaints or service complaints, if a complainant requests such a review. And then lastly, under Section 83 of the Police Services Act, all disciplinary proceedings arising from public complaints or chief's complaints must be commenced within 6 months, unless the chief applies to the board for an extension, and the board is of the opinion that the delay was more than reasonable. So, the board has its own bylaw that relates to public complaints. This is Complaints Bylaw 2010-01, and it addresses all of those areas that I just spoke about, and it sets out procedures for you. We won't go through them today, but it's there for your review. I'm going to turn it over to Inspector Manola. He's going to take you through the public complaints process from his perspective.
Okay, as you see there, Part 5 of the Police Services Act deals with complaints and disciplinary hearing proceedings. Any member of the public can file a complaint against an officer, against the policies of the police service, or against the services provided by a police service. The Act does allow for third parties and witnesses to file complaints, even if they're not directly involved. And there's also a list there of who cannot complain to the OIPRD through this process. They have another mechanism. They can always complain. It could become a chief's complaint if they're a person ineligible to complain. Also under Part 5 addresses the chief's complaint process. So this is when it's generated internally. Basically, misconduct is alleged against an officer. It applies to our sworn members only. Civilian members are subject to a different discipline process, falls under regular labor relations. Misconduct, it's a very extensive definition in the regulations. I won't go through all of the examples, but pretty much everything an officer can do wrong can be captured in some form of misconduct. Or unsatisfactory work performance also falls under this. With chief complaints, the investigation, as I said, it's a complaint that's initiated internally. Generally, it comes through professional standards, but it could come from a district. The complaint is signed off by the chief. He's the complainant on that. Generally, professional standards conduct the investigations for the more serious ones. Some of the less serious ones can be sent back to an officer's supervisor or management team to investigate. We do a written report. It goes to the chief, and we either substantiate or unsubstantiate it. And at that point, the chief makes a determination whether it's misconduct of a serious nature or not of a serious nature. If it's of a serious nature, it has to go before a police act hearing, a formal hearing. And if it's not of a serious nature, then it's subject to informal discipline. And with that, it could be a number of factors. It could be counseling, coaching, up to loss of hours, up to 160 hours. I'll jump back to public complaints. So spoke earlier about that. Those go through the Office of the Independent Police Review Directorate. Public knows about this. It's advertised on the website. We get inquiries directly to our office. We steer people to the OIPRD. So the OIPRD is required to review every complaint they receive, and they make a determination whether the complaint is officer conduct or a police service policy. And then they will decide who will investigate it. The majority of the complaints they receive go back to the agency that the officer works for to investigate, or they may retain them, or they may send them to another police service to investigate on behalf. The director of the OIPRD may decide not to deal with the complaint. There's a few conditions that they can defer them. The most common one we see is that the complainant is subject to a criminal matter. They will wait till that criminal matter's been resolved before they will launch the investigation. And then the director may decide not to deal with a complaint if the complainant was not directly affected or a witness. So I mentioned earlier that witnesses can complain. What we see a lot of is somebody sees a video that's been posted on YouTube or Twitter. They will complain to the OIPRD. If the person's not directly involved or a witness, the OIPRD will not entertain those ones. Local complaints. This is when a member of the public goes into the police station, they have a complaint about the conduct of an officer. If it's not of a serious nature, they can be resolved at that level. As long as the officer agrees to it and the complainant agrees to it, it could be something as simple as a sit down, have a conversation, see the incident from both persons' perspective. Maybe the officer apologizes, but again, it's got to be of a minor offense, a less serious nature. If it's of a serious offense, we steer them towards the OIPRD. If it's of a serious nature and the person does not want to file an OIPRD complaint, we will initiate a chief's complaint and take over the investigation that way to make sure things like misconduct does not get ignored. The local resolution gets documented, it goes to the OIPRD, it gets tracked, and generally, as I said, it's the misconduct was not of a serious nature.
So it is possible for public complaints to be sent directly to boards. Effectively, the board really doesn't need to take any steps to address those complaints other than to refer them directly back to OIPRD. In terms of complaints against officers, there are two options for OIPRD to deal with it. They can retain the complaint for investigation, or they can refer it back to the chief of the police service for investigation. They can also refer complaints to a third-party police service if they feel that there's a conflict of interest. Public complaints about the conduct of an officer referred to the chief by the OIPRD are dealt with the same way and investigated in the same way as a chief's complaint would be. If a complaint is substantiated and a hearing is held and a decision is made, then a copy of that decision will be provided to the OIPRD and to the board. Where the board's mandate becomes a little more involved is where you're dealing with chief's complaints or complaints against chiefs of police or deputy chiefs. Those complaints, if they're provided to the OIPRD, are screened and then sent back to the board for review. After review, if the board is of the opinion that no misconduct has occurred, then no action will be taken. If they're of the opinion that the misconduct has been substantiated, then it has to be returned to the OIPRD for investigation. In those instances, again, OIPRD will do their investigation. They'll provide a written report to the board, and they'll again make a decision as to whether or not the complaint is substantiated or not. If on reasonable grounds, the director of the OIPRD believes that the complaint is substantiated, they will refer the matter back and they'll make a indication as to whether or not the misconduct is serious or not. I won't take you through all of the various options available to you, hearings, dealing with matters informally, etc. As I noted, we do have copies of this entire presentation for your future reference. So it will provide you with a guideline and a roadmap should you ever have to deal with these types of complaints. Next area of intersection between the public complaints process and your mandate has to deal with policy and service complaints about the police service. Again, when the OIPRD receives these complaints, they will be referred back to the chief for investigation. The chief has to review the complaint, determine what action to take, and then at the end of that investigation, notify the complainant, the OIPRD, and the board in writing as to what the outcome was, and then inform the complainant that they do have a right to come to the board and ask for a further review. So there is a time limit for asking for that review. It's 30 days. If it's submitted on time, then the board must advise the chief that the complaint has come in. There's a couple of options for dealing with these reviews of service complaints. You can take an action, take no action, or deal with a review, either the board as a whole or by committee, and make recommendations as to what further steps should be taken. It can be referred back to the chief for review, for further investigation. One of the features of these types of reviews is that while conducting it, the board or the committee of the board may choose to hold a public meeting with respect to the complaint. So there's an opportunity for some public input when dealing with these types of service or policy complaints. We did want to highlight for you, when talking about the public complaints process, that the OIPRD does have the ability to conduct audits. And effectively a performance audit of how a police service is dealing with public complaints, and it's done at the board's expense. Done independently, but it may be under the direction of the OIPRD. Those results will be made public, and under Section 57 of the Police Services Act, the OIPRD does have the ability to conduct investigations into what they deem to be systemic issues related to complaints from the public, and they have done that in the past for various police services across the province. The last area we wanted to touch on in terms of your mandate is the extension of time for the service of a notice of hearing under Part 5 of the Act. So in a circumstance where it's not possible, or there are good reasons for why a notice of hearing cannot be issued and served on an officer within 6 months of the time that the subject matter comes to the attention of the chief, in order to validate that process, the chief must make an application to the board for an extension of time. That application will be served upon any affected officer, advising them of the opportunity to make written submissions to the board as to why that request should be granted or not. These are usually done during a regularly scheduled board meeting, and the board will consider the chief's application as well as written submissions of any from the officer. And then there is a process where the board must, once they've reviewed the application, issue written reasons for its decision and provide those reasons to the affected officer and the chief. It's effectively an administrative process. It's not one in which, the board's mandate there is not to determine or consider the merits of the charges that an officer might be facing, and it really shouldn't really deal with the issue of prejudice to the officer. Rather, it's whether or not a notice of hearing could be reasonably served within that 6 months. And there's lots of reasons for why that might not be able to happen. And primary reason for that is that the misconduct at issue is the subject of a parallel criminal proceeding. And those proceedings, matters don't get dealt with that often in 6 months unless there's a guilty plea or the matter's been withdrawn. So very often we'll come to you to ask for those exceptions. We did want to touch on some of the confidentiality provisions in the police service. As I said, there is a opportunity for the board to hold a public hearing in relation to, or a public meeting in relation to a service or policy complaint, but otherwise, under Section 95 of the Police Services Act, there's really secrecy provisions. So it means that any information that's obtained by the investigators, by the chief, or by the board needs to be kept confidential. And there are provisions in the Police Services Act that say that any documents or information that's gathered during the course of a Part 5 investigation isn't even admissible in a civil proceeding, in an action against the board or the service or an officer. So what's made public? If the matter is being dealt with informally, that's not made public. If there's been a hearing after a complaint has been substantiated, the reasons for decision will be posted on the services website. If it's as a result of a public complaint that's gone through the OIPRD and the OIPRD has referred the matter to the chief for a hearing, that decision will also be posted on their website. So as I said, all of these provisions and the information that we're providing to you today are in the handout, so that's for your future reference. And hopefully that'll provide you with a roadmap should you have to deal with these types of issues in the future. Do you have any questions for Inspector Manella? Right?
Mr. Board Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it goes back to the very first thing that you had said, that under the Police Services Act, it says that every board must have a policy.
Right.
I guess the question I would have is, do they set out what the policy must cover? Like, is there a boilerplate that they have for every police service, or is each police service allowed to come up with their own policy? It's just trying to make sure that there's a inherent level of fairness across, the whole province, that one jurisdiction can't do a policy this way and as opposed to another doing it the other way. So it's just curious about that, is how standardized they are across the province.
Now, Mr. Costigan raises.
I can help out on that one. So, the requirements are in the legislation, and which includes the section on OIPRD, which is fairly new, less than 15 years old. There are templates that the province provides for suggested policies on a number of things, largely the adequacy standards. I think this is also one area, but those templates are not binding. In our case, we have a bylaw, which was which was adopted in 2010. And there is new legislation and regulations coming out regarding all this. So it's premature to update that. And part of that question will be, should it be bylaw or policy? Because the requirement in legislation is policy, right? Yeah.
Clerk? Interesting. Thank you. Good question. Kurt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question evolves around the notion, and you mentioned it at the outset of the presentation, awaiting the outcome of a criminal proceeding, if, in fact, there is a criminal proceeding. And I've often wondered about that, and it concerns me at times about how long matters of uncertainty hang over a member and a family, and it can be for years. And I think, you know, if we're waiting every time for the criminal matter to be settled, that doesn't help in terms of the period of time. And so I'd just like some comment from you in regard to that, and what your thoughts are. And I mean, the burden of proof for a criminal matter and for a conduct matter under the Police Services Act are very different. And so, you know, why do we wait? Do we wait when we shouldn't and not wait when we shouldn't, I guess is my question.
No, and from a practical perspective, delay is often caused by this. In order to complete an investigation, the subject officer needs to be interviewed and give a statement. And the direction that the officers are given is that they should not give a statement while their criminal matter is still live, given that they believe that that statement, if given, could be used in the criminal proceedings. There are evidentiary rules that make the use of that statement very difficult to introduce in the criminal matter, but it's been done. And consequently, defense counsel, the lawyers who are representing the officers who are facing criminal charges, give the advice not to come in for an interview until their criminal matter is done. And so that delays the process.
So it's a procedure and a process.
In a sense. And it's a rights issue, right? In the criminal...
And I just feel sometimes that families would like to clear matters up.
Oh, absolutely.
The chief has to stand up.
Yeah, chief. Yeah, I mean, just further to that, and Ken and I have had this discussion on it in a couple of cases, and once in Belleville and once in Kingston, we proceeded with the PSA before the criminal. But what often happens is either the Crown Attorney realizes this parallel disciplinary hearing may go on and they ask for us to stay that or to hold it off, or the defense counsel does. And to Ken's point, when it comes to the statement, there are some cases, and that was the case in the two that we proceeded with, where the evidence was either so obvious, let's, for example, the offense is captured on video. I don't need the officer's statement to say whether they did it or not. We have the evidence, and it would not, that same evidence would be available for the criminal trial. So I am able sometimes to go to the Crown Attorney and say, I don't want to wait 3 years until the criminal code trial occurs because someone is going to be off for 3 years, full salary, and that gets complicated sometimes. So there are times where I would prefer to push the PSA ahead if we can do it with the proper amount of evidence.
That's me.
Yeah, it does. I'm happy to hear that because again, my primary concern often is about the length of time it takes for an obvious decision and the hardship that it has on the whole family.
Ingrid, your next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my time with the board, this has not occurred often here in Halton. The chief just mentioned some examples in other locations. The question that I have is, if the complaint is substantiated, the worst possible outcome, the consequence for the individual would be termination.
That's correct.
And are we aware that we have had such a case here?
Yeah, there have been terminations at the end of hearings or shortly before them.
Chief, want to jump in on this?
Yeah, and just to that point, and subsequent to Ken's comments, we also have situations, all police services do, where you're coming up to the hearing and the officer resigns or retires early, and then you lose jurisdiction for the hearing. You cannot discipline an officer who's no longer an officer. So that happens often as well. The other thing I wanted to say, just in summary really, is there's OIPRD complaints and chief's complaints. Most go to the OIPRD, and I've made this comment before. Stephen Leach, who's there as the director right now, is very reasonable, tries to get things done in a hurry. But I would say more than 90% of them just come back to us to investigate. So if the province really wants to have an independent complaints process, I would prefer the OIPRD have a few $1 million a year more and investigate all of them. And then it's independent. But the reality is they don't, so most of them come back to us, and then the OIPRD has oversight to make sure the investigation is done appropriately. And the chief's complaints, really, the only difference is it's not a member of the public complaining. It's a matter that comes to our and then my attention, either through supervisors or other officers or cameras and video footage, where I say, yes, this is a complaint that needs to be investigated, and that kicks it off as a chief's complaint. But it is probably 90% of the OIPRD complaints just come back to us. There have been a couple recently where the director of the OIPRD has contacted us and asked us or required us to do an investigation into another service, into a police officer in another service, to take some sort of a conflict out, and we're certainly in a position to do that.
Are you satisfied with that?
Very time-consuming too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question regarding the OIPRD. You mentioned that they have the ability to perform an audit. Has there been an audit in Halton in the past?
That's my knowledge, and that relates purely to the administration of the public complaint system. So.
Brady, you want to jump in?
Yes, please. I have a couple of questions here. The first one is there a requirement or a request for extension of the investigation past the 6-month deadline? A requirement for that request to come in before the end of the 6-month deadline?
No, it's always after the 6 months.
Good enough, because it's been a issue elsewhere. What about, can you speak, Ken, about to public complaints made to the board about a board member or board policies?
Yeah, that's subject to your code of conduct, the board's own code of conduct, and the code that's in the regulations. Those complaints would be sent to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, and they would conduct the investigation.
So the main point here is it's another different agency. And the board does have some responsibilities as well in that process. My understanding is that there is a code of conduct being developed in regulation for special constables whose status is civilian, not police officer. And will the public complaints process be extended to them as well?
No. It has been extended already under the new legislation. The SIU Act has already been enacted and in place, and special constables are now subject to being designated as a subject officer by the SIU. But the
officers as well?
Yes.
So they can be compelled to
They can always be designated as witnesses and under the act.
Can they be compelled to provide,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa, then,
I think we have a procedural question.
okay.
No, go ahead. Could we just ask the clerk to pass around the hard copies of the presentation? And the copies that is covered in the presentation, I just wanted to understand what procedures are in place to try to be more preventative from these types of conduct and complaints. Is the code reviewed on a frequent basis? Is it posted somewhere? I'm just wondering how we ensure that we're being proactive enough to try to limit these to, I don't think it's a place we want to be, so what are we doing to try to avoid being there?
Exactly. We do have a code of conduct, an internal code of conduct that not only addresses the Police Service Act misconduct, but our own. It's in the middle of being rewritten, updated, but we have that. We've provided training in our in-service training to our members about code of conduct, proper conduct. We have our in-car camera system. There are reviews of officer conduct through that. That's pretty much a way for preventative education and proper supervision.
And the chief and the deputies can speak to this as well, but that's the key to avoiding public complaints, is ensuring the officers are following their training, that they're well trained, and that they're well supervised, and that they're given appropriate training with respect to interactions with members of the public, issues of civility, issues of dealing with individuals from racialized groups, from disadvantaged groups, mentally ill.
That's excellent, and I think that's a huge piece that connects the presentation to the work that we do every single day.
Yeah?
I'm satisfied with
I do have, okay, one more unless you want to go ahead. I have two questions, but I'll let you, I'll be good chair and let you go.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You're always a good chair. I guess the question was, there was something on the chief that indicated about how, that if there was proper funding, for OIPRD, let me get the acronym wrong, that, they would do the investigations. Would it be better when you've sent one and they've looked at it and they send it back and say, it should be investigated and carried? Would it be better if it was done by another service to look at it? Or depends on what the severity is of what the complaint is?
The complex part of that, in a short answer, is we've discussed that at the chief's level and the executive level with different services. The reality of the number of complaints, for example, that the City of Toronto would deal with, every other GTA service would be probably required to deal with all of those, and somehow Toronto would have to do all of the other GTAs, and it would just be unmanageable. So if the OIPRD is sending it back, it is probably better to be dealt with locally, and then they review the decision anyway, and the person has a right to appeal.
But they would also, when they send it back, they might suggest that it go to another service to be looked at. Do they do that as well?
They do from time to time, but only when it's a particularly contentious, perhaps, complaint or issue, where there may be a further complication with the local services doing it. Then they won't send it back to that service at all. They'll send it to another one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Claire. So I have two questions. The first one is with respect to this process. We've heard very much about what the board's role is. We've heard about the chief's role and the OIPRD. What's the role of the actual subject of the complaint? So what happens with the officer? What process are they going through? And is there funding for representation if they require counsel? What's the role of the association, et cetera? So I'd like to look at it from that perspective as well.
I mean, throughout the process, the officer is generally represented by someone from the association. If the matter is substantiated, they will often retain counsel on behalf of the officer. Under the collective agreement, if the complaint is found at the end of a hearing not to be of a serious nature or not to be substantiated, there are indemnification provisions.
Okay. During that process, so from the point where an officer has been notified that there's a complaint that he's involved in, is it the association that comes behind him, or do they normally retain outside counsel?
So generally it's the association, and now they have two counsel who work for them directly in-house.
We recently met them. Yeah.
Right. So they will generally come to the interviews. And
obviously that's without cost to the officer.
Correct.
Okay. At some point, who makes the determination of whether or not it is something that the association's counsel can address? Is there a point before a hearing? Is there some point where the association just says, "Oh, this is just so egregious, we can't manage this," or do they manage the process through to the hearing?
Yeah, the association has a legal committee that reviews every charge that's made against an officer, and they'll decide whether or not they'll be represented by in-house counsel or by external counsel. And I can't speak to how they make those decisions.
I don't want to put somebody on the spot, but I noticed that the association president is here. Do you have no pressure because I didn't prepare you for this, or warning you I was going to ask this question. Do you have any comments on this?
No, and in fact, being in PSB before, we have a process in place where notification goes out for the complaint. It also includes a package with the association, who to call, who to contact.
Thank you, President Ellie. Okay, and my second question is with respect to the local resolution or the minor complaint. Can you give me an example of what it looks like? When you look at that long list of what's considered grounds for a complaint, it doesn't look like there's a lot left over that could be considered minor. So what would be, give me an example of what would be appropriate to be dealt with at a local level?
In civil behavior, maybe the officer was rude, maybe the officer swore. As long as they don't breach a human rights ground, that's going to be serious misconduct that can't be dealt with locally. It's that in civil, and the bulk that we see are somebody got a traffic ticket, they don't like the way the officer spoke to them, they don't like the way they dealt with them. Those can be dealt with at the local level. Those are the majority of the ones we see dealt with at the district level. It's incivility.
And I said two questions. I have sort of a part B to that question. What about traffic conduct? I just happened to have a recent constituent call me concerned that a police officer was acting appropriately without his lights on, her lights on. Where would somebody take that kind of complaint, or is that even a valid complaint to make?
That is a valid complaint, and we take those complaints, but those also can be dealt with locally. As long as the officer's driving didn't cross a threshold of something criminal or dangerous, that can be dealt with at the local level as well.
Terrific. And for anybody watching, how would that process start? Is it literally walking into a station or calling on an emergency line?
No, you walk into the station, because if it does turn into an OIPRD complaint, we will help them fill out the form at the station. So they've got the opportunity to walk in, they can speak to the officer supervisor, the on-duty supervisor. It can be resolved there, and if they're not satisfied with what's happened there, they get the package to go to the OIPRD from there.
Sounds great. Members of the board, I'll come back to you for one last call for questions. Any comments, questions? That looked like you were pondering something there. You almost told.
Sorry, yes, I do. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the fact that the OIPRD is really sending back 90% of these complaints, and I have some reservations on that, and is this something that the board can do about, or because that also places a lot of burden on the service itself, in whether it's a good process or where are we doing?
Okay. Well, the chief just his hand shot immediately when that came up. So let's go to the chief and see if he has any comment on that.
Yeah, through the chair, it's really a funding issue, so it's easy for a provincial organization to send something back to a municipal police service, which is self-funded. So we pay for all of these investigations. They would keep the ones that they deem to be really serious in some cases, or contentious for other reasons. the ones that come back, the majority are not that serious, and it's okay for us to do them, but it does consume our time to do those. I don't think there's much that the board could do other than always PSB or a group lobbying the provincial government to say that we would prefer all of these to be done independently by this organization. It would take a lot of resources for them to do that. So it would be a large amount of money for the province. I know one new board member would appreciate the impact of that. Or little bits of, in their mind, financial impact for 50 police services.
I do want to have a conversation at some point with the board about advocacy and what role we can play in advocacy. So we could certainly put a pin in that and bring that to that conversation.
Definitely, I think that would be fine.
Yeah, thank you. Kurt, you had a question?
I guess another contributing factor that hasn't been mentioned is when the SIU is involved. Any comment in that regard? Because that involves another party.
Yeah, we didn't address SIU investigations because those aren't public complaints.
But it does bear, I guess, on the process. Would it not, or could it not?
The SIU's investigation takes precedence, so if there was an SIU matter that also had a complaint or evidence of a misconduct, we would have to wait for the SIU matter to be dealt with before we could initiate our process. Not to say we wouldn't gather evidence and do all that, but the SIU takes precedent before any other investigation of ours. And there's that parallel investigation results in a chief's report, which then comes to the board.
I'm wondering how the board would feel about potentially requesting a presentation on that process, the SIU process, so we have a better understanding. Is there generally consensus? Is that something that we could coordinate?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Same presenters.
So, can I get a motion to request a presentation on SIU come before the board at the earliest possible? Clark, seconded by Nav, all in favor? That's carried. That will be captured in our action registry now. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, Chief, did you have further?
Well, the only other thing I wanted to add, Mr. Leach is very efficient at what he does, and he sometimes proactively will do a systemic review of an area that he deems is high risk. So he's done that a couple of times in the last probably 24 months. And in both of those cases, and I think in 3 cases altogether, he has held out our internal policy as the way to frame that issue and to put that forward to other services. And in fact, from time to time, we'll ask if he could share our policy. I don't want to talk about what the policy was in public because it's an important policing issue, but we could certainly touch on it in camera.
The good thing of today's meeting is that Halton leads the way. We've heard that in multiple presentations. Thank you for your presentation, gentlemen. That was very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. Members of the board, our next presentation is on Community Day, Special Friends Day. Who's going to take us through that? See that, Mr.
Morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, Superintendent Bob Gurley. I'm here to present on Police Day and Special Friends Day. The timing of this actually couldn't be any better because, as you know, there's a request coming forward, but also in the fact that over the last couple of weeks I'm now had CMB moved under my portfolio, so CMB will be with Communication Records. So the Community Mobilisation Bureau are the ones responsible for running Police Day, so it all fits in very nicely. So Special Friends Day, I know looking around the table, a lot of you have attended Special Friends Day. We've been running it here in Halton for, I think, 26 years. I've been involved for 17 and the chair for the last 14. It's the most stressful but enjoyable day of my calendar every year. But for just pre-COVID, we were looking to move towards the direction of working with then Inspector Biggs, now Superintendent Biggs, to amalgamate Special Friends Day with Police Day. Obvious advantages, bringing the whole community together, and then logistically having the ability to do have more displays, etc. on the day. So Special Friends Day, for those who don't know, we had moved it to headquarters over the last few years. It used to be in Milton Heritage Park, and it's a day of just giving a fun day for all those with developmental or physical needs, and we ran the whole event with volunteers, both internally and some externally. And so we had talked about, as I said, moving the two together. So this year we're proposing, the first year, that the initial part of Police Day will be dedicated to Special Friends Day. We have a database of those who attend Special Friends Day every year, and we'll be reaching out to them and through the networks also in the community and through the school boards. So it's targeted for those appropriate to come for the day. We do the general, have the opening ceremony. We have our honorary drum major, our honorary flag party, and that's much sought after positions, and opening parade as normal. This year also, we'll be having, for the first time, I was at an event just before Christmas down in Niagara with a band called Melody Minds, which is Special Friends band that plays an assortment of rock music and what have you. They're going to be coming and attending our event for the first time, which would be great. And so we have up to peaks to 500 attendees, friends, family, caregivers, and attend. And the whole day, our goal of that was the whole day was just, it's a free event, and it's given a really nice day for some of the most vulnerable in our community. So then with this year, we'll be doing pretty much the same as we're doing, but we'll have more opportunity for more police displays that will be occurring for on the day. Then, which rolls us, so the Special Friends part, which is from 10 to 12, and then from 12 to 4 will be the traditional Police Day that we do. Obviously, all of our Special Friends are more than welcome to stay on as long as they wish, but then we'll move into the traditional Police Day. The Police Day itself is the largest event that we organise for the community. Up to 4,000 people attend, and I've attended it many times myself. It's very well received, and it can't be undervalued. The opportunity for us as officers to bring our friends, family and loved ones to actually see some of the stuff that we do. And one of the favourite pictures I have was whenever I used to be bomb tech here, is holding my son in my arms with all the bomb stuff on. I actually looked like I did something exciting afterwards. But so the Police Day on the days you see that we have the opening ceremonies, we have numerous displays from tactical, canine, and our motorcycling. We will have the EDU as normal set up their stands, and then our pipe band, and then we have all the inflatables and games. Just one of the points to this for Special Friends Day, some of the inflatables and games we have are pitched at a great variety of levels. So that's why there's additional budgetary component to it this year, that because we lay on specific games. And as I say, they're staffed by volunteers year in, year out. They're the ones that call us and ask us when Special Friends Day is. So we do that, so that's additional inflatables and games that normally wouldn't be on Police Day, but it's just expanding to make it that much more inclusive. We provide free food for everyone, and which is a big bonus. We just try and monitor, make sure that people don't go back for their seconds and thirds. So, yeah, there goes that thought. So the police day, we're looking forward to do that all-inclusive for the day. The day itself, with the new headquarters here, lends itself open to it, because then the large parking lot can be set up with all the presentations, and then we have the regional parking on the Saturday, which is then available. So logistically, it's quite easy to manage from that perspective, and ensure everyone has a fun-filled, safe environment to come enjoy, and then we can show off all the great things that we do here. That's just the basic setup of what we're doing, with the motorcycle demo and K9 doing it as well. Say the Special Friends Day, with all the games that we do, and then we also give gifts, toys. And this year we're just debating what we go from t-shirts to hats, and just debating the order on that. Obviously, prior to it, we'll be going to social media and doing the general media releases on the upcoming event. And as I say, we send out the invitations to Special Friends through the community groups and individually. And then on the day, you can see the variety of displays that we have. The one I find that every year, without fail, is very, very popular is the prisoner escort wagon. Everybody wants to be handcuffed and put in the back of that with the door closed, and you're just, oh, how's this going to go down? But it's every year, it's one of the very popular, and obviously what we do is tactical, but it's funny how some things are more, and you see the bomb tech in the middle of it too. So on the day, obviously we're going to be setting up from the night before, and we already have the team. I'm only into the role of community mobilization bureau the last couple of weeks, but the team's been working hard ahead of it. Staff Sergeant Ryan Snow and Julie already had the groundwork all in place, and as I say, with the Special Friends attitude, it should just make it that wee bit extra special, I think, this year, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, any questions in relation to Police Day? It's our way of going out. It's on May 13th, as I say, Special Friends, specific 10 to 12, and then open to everyone from 12 to 4. And you're all very welcome to come, obviously.
Great plan.
Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah.
We have the community room here is also set up with displays. We have ordering tents, marquees, but if it's an absolute downpour, there's only so much to do, because we actually set up crafts and activities for the Special Friends where we set up the tent. It used to be held in here, so it's hope. We have had torrential downpour for Special Friends Day on a couple of occasions, but we will for an actual, so fingers crossed, because it ties into Police Week, and that's the timing off, so that's why it's tied into that.
I got to tell you, I'm very excited about this happening, and this was a highlight of when my kids were younger, because they're now all adults. Coming to Police Day here at headquarters was always a highlight of our year, certainly marked the beginning of the spring and summer was near when Police Day was near. Members of the board, do you have any questions? Yes, please.
Sure. I think it's great that we have it again, and this is our first time back since COVID. So the last time we would have had this was 2019.
Police Day last year? No? So it was 2019, yeah, and then Special Friends Day was suspended as well for that time period.
So what will likely happen is we will exceed the level of attendance because of the enthusiasm for the event. So,
if it's any indicator, we at the town have always had a fire prevention day as well at our fire training campus. And like Police Day, it has been suspended during COVID. We had our first one last year, and it was packed. It was cheap and gel. It was a very busy day, so I suspect that what Ingrid is saying is correct. So make sure you have lots of hamburgers.
Yeah,
Lots of it.
yeah. They will come back for second and third.
So we're welcome, but what can we do? How can we help you?
In relation to it, your attendance and presence is obviously a key factor. Later there'll be a funding request in relation specific, because there's specific costs that are separate to it, which moving forward, if we keep this format, that'll all be incorporated into just one overall event. But because this is the inaugural and we're testing the water with it, I'm optimistic that it'll be a success, just running them both back to back. So from that perspective, it was just within your own networks, is reach out to let people know they're very welcome, and then also from the Special Friends, just put in contact with us, and then maybe extend the personal invitation to them. And then we'll be doing the Chief for the Day as well event, and as I say, with the honorary drum major and honorary flag party and stuff like that. So it's all very interactive and great day.
With respect to publicity, I have a suggestion that as you get your package for publicity organized, make sure you send it out to all members of council, all four of the councils, as well as the regional councils. We all have our channels of communication, which are quite wide. And I personally, I can't speak for all my colleagues across the region, but I would be personally happy to put it in my newsletters and my social media as well.
I know in the previous years, just from the Special Friends perspective, I always extended an invitation to the respective mayors. And it's, at that time, the Special Friends Day used to be in June, was very close to Father's Day, and it was a busy time, so...
So forget us lonely councillors. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I'll have one more time for questions. Jane, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up? Okay. Any further questions? That's great. We look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. Members of the board, it is currently 10:33. We have a pre-planned break period at 10:30. So I'm going to call a recess of this meeting until 10:45. Just as an explanation for those of you who've been here since 9, we've been here since 8, so the board just needs a chance to stretch, and it's good practice from a health and mental health perspective as well. So we are in recess until 10:45.
One.
Same one.
Okay, anything else? Okay, can I get a motion to approve 3.2 and 3.3 then? So moved. Clark, seconded by? Lisa, thank you very much. All in favor? Okay, 3.2 and 3.3 are approved. So, going back to 3. Sorry.
I thought 3.3 was being moved to, isn't that the annual?
Oh, you're right, that's right, we were gonna move that to discussion. Okay, let's revise that. Will the mover and seconder consent to removing 3.3 from their motion? We're gonna move that to discussion. Your motion would be to approve 3.2. Sure. Okay, Clark? Thank you, Nav. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, for 3.1, community safety well-being plan. Ingrid, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting that Andrew Tyrrell also made reference to the 3.9 million that is coming to Halton Region for building a safer community fund. As I read through the report, I see that we're going to focus on gun and gang violence. We're going to look at crime prevention and intervention for children, youth, and young adults. And we're going to share outcomes and reporting with other children's aid societies. The question that I have is, given when we read the performance report, given the increase in crime, especially auto theft, for example, should we not look at the 3.9 million and determine if there are other more critical priorities than what is listed?
Chief.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you for the question. It's an interesting scenario because this 3.9 million is not ours. The 3.9 million is not being given to the Halton Regional Police Service. It's being given to the region of Halton, and there were similar proportionate funds given to a number of municipalities across Canada. So it really goes to the region to work with partners, and we'll be in the mix, helping support, recommend, prioritize, but it's not our decision and it's not our money. So it has come out from the federal government as preventative funding, and a lot of the talk around that was the prevention, trying to prevent youth from getting into gangs and organized crime. So we will work. I think it's got a very nice nexus to what an organization like CCAH does, because it's a very positive environment to bring a lot of our youth into who may be marginalized in some cases. And you might deal with it more on the regional side, Raj, but I would like it to be our money to do a lot of different things when it comes to crime, but this particular grant from the federal government is not earmarked that way.
And through the chair, if I can just add, this completely aligns with our rebranding and remodeling of our youth engagement strategy. In fact, we sit at this table, we can help identify ways to stream funds for upstream interventions. So this isn't even at that risk mitigation level. It's about how do you get to kids before others get to them and kind of solicit them into that lifestyle. So it goes hand in hand with our enforcement strategy. We do have funding pockets that help with the guns and gangs strategy and how we operationalize that and do the enforcement. This is equally as important, and it's great to have the federal government behind us, and that it's a good pot of money that will drive localized programming that we can help guide with our key stakeholders. So we're very excited about this opportunity.
Is this the first for us, the 4 million, or have we received? This is the first.
Yeah. And it's spread out over 4 years.
Well, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kurt, you're up next.
Yeah, I wanted to raise a question, Mr. Chair. I recently had a conversation with an officer with Niagara, and he was telling me about a rash of grandparents, and of course I'm a grandparent. I don't know if that's the reason he was telling me or not, but fraud. Where elderly people are approached or contacted by phone with a threat that their grandchild is being harmed or whatever. And he was telling me that there had been at least $1 million lost that the Niagara police were aware of. So one part of my question is, what's the scope of that here, in your view? But the other part of it is he was relating to me that the Niagara police had taken action to visit local bank branches and tried to educate the branches that one, this was happening, two, people are withdrawing money, three, you might be able to help. And what he told me, I was actually quite surprised, is that in one case, subsequent to them visiting the branches, someone walked in and wanted to withdraw a large sum of money. And when questioned on why they were doing it, they said that there was a threat against their grandchild. And so I guess the person at the bank branch said, have you tried to call that person? And the person that was standing in front of them said, no. So we'll call. And they called, and the grandchild answered the phone. So I just raised that because that was related to me, as I said, by an officer with Niagara. And I was wondering what your experience is here with, is that on the rise in Halton? Are we seeing it here? I suspect we are.
First, I'll address it first and certainly turn it over to the deputies for details. It's absolutely on the rise here. As close as my next door neighbor in the condo in Bronte, gave $8,000 to somebody through that same grandparent scam. People will get to know the name of the grandchild. They'll phone. It may only work 1 out of 50 times, but it's $8,000 or $10,000 or $15,000. Sometimes they'll come back a second time if they're successful the first time. And the individual, in this case, was extremely embarrassed that she had fallen for it. She was by no means she knew that she should have realized what was going on. In some instances, the elderly grandparents do not. Banks are taking more of a proactive stance on it. I've got a couple of really good acquaintances who are bank managers, and they tell me about all the time when people are coming in and in a strange way withdrawing a large amount of money, and they try to stop them from doing it. And in some instances, there's a very positive outcome, such as the one that you're mentioning. But that sort of online scam and phone scam is continually going on, and it's at such a high level that they're successful, unfortunately, despite our education efforts, we have social media around that particular issue as well. But it's still going on far more than most people think, and I would suggest largely unreported as well, similar to some of the business takeovers, because people might not realize. And it was just on the news last night, actually, where now the fraudsters are using artificial intelligence to somehow mimic the different voices of people. So I suppose if they can get a sample of someone's voice and then have the computer generate the message, then the individual is actually now going to think they're hearing the person's actual voice. It may lead to additional victims. Roger, Jeff.
Through the chair, just to top up, this has been on our radar for a number of years, sadly, and as a result, we have moved upstream. We've connected with financial institutions. We've done educational programs through retirement homes and assisted living areas, and a fairly robust social media presence to connect with caregivers of those who are maybe vulnerable or targeted in that space. And yet, the numbers are staggering. There's a lot of people that are victimized, and we don't hear about it. So the idea is we're trying to create clear paths of reporting so that we can get ahead of it. And we've connected in our Community Mobilization Bureau through our elder services to help drive and own that programming, so that we're always on top of what the current state is and how to assist those that provide care for vulnerable people.
And I do want to add on the positive side, at times, the potential victim will reach out to us before the payment's made, and we will let the fraudsters go through with coming to collect the money, and we've been able to make the arrests at the victim's home in some cases. and take those people into custody. So they're very highly organized, but I love it when they fall for something.
Clerk, you have a comment?
Well, I think it's one that, it appears, every now and again. I did see the news story last night. I'm trying to remember if it was on CTV or on Global, the story, but it was fascinating how they're now using the AI to create the voices. It was just incredible. But I think one of the biggest ones we can try to work with are through the senior centers in the region to highlight it and having material there so that it's seen. But I know at the stores, they get the people who they have the phone in their hand, and my spouse works at a store that if anyone comes in to buy a large quantity of Amazon gift cards, it has to be a manager who is the only one who can sell it to them. And they brought that in after hearing about people coming in, and they did that as a fail-safe. And if people insist they want to buy $2,000 worth of gift cards, and it's not for anything, they do have to sell it to them, but they've tried to just slow that down to get people. And, and they'll even say, is there somebody on the phone right now saying you have to pay for it? So I think the stores can help out in that regard as well, and just making sure that the managers and the cashiers and the people who are actually dealing with that there is no way in the world the CRA. I should have been in jail years ago for not paying my income tax and for my social security number being compromised, but I think we have to figure out ways to get it down. Social media is a great one, but the target audience of the grandparent scam, most of them are not on social media. Their grandkids may be why it works, and that's why it works. They only need to have one a day, and it's very profitable. So it is great. I think, if we can try to get some of the material more into the senior centers, I think that'll probably really help.
I noticed at a recent mass merchandise store here in Oakville, there's actually a sign at the gift card station. It says CRA does not take gift cards. Yeah. As simple as that. So that's a good point. Anything further on 3.1? Kurt, was your question?
Thank you very much.
Seeing none, Kurt, would you mind moving that item for me, please? Thank you. Seconded by Clark. Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to 3.3. That's the annual police service performance report. I'm just wondering, Chief, would you or one of your deputies or a member of staff be prepared to give us an overview presentation on this? This is an important, obvious topic that the board's very interested in. So, could you give us get us started on this?
Yeah, certainly. From a very high level to start, crime is up. Crime is up significantly. Crime is up significantly across the GTA and beyond. I think there's a variety of impacts. Some of it is what I would suggest is some sort of
that is, we were using a baseline of an average of 2018 and 2019, pre-pandemic, for a statistical benchmark, and then we were comparing 22 values. We've also done the analysis of statistics to not take in population growth, and you'll see representation of per 100,000 people, so that's kind of indicative of how this report's laid out. To the chief's point about extortion and sextortion, I can tell you that 95% of the people committing these crimes do not live in this country. In fact, the most common countries are Nigeria and India. They use spoofing tools and VPN software to kind of scramble the signal, so it's very hard to identify, enforce, and prosecute these offenders. But it's such an easy, target-rich environment because of just the mental state of a lot of people who are in the dating world and young teens. So much so that we've partnered with youth mental health agencies for campaigns on education, working with the school boards to really drive home the importance of understanding what sextortion looks like. And again, to the chief's point and my involvement with the Reach Out Center for Kids, it's alarming the number of people that go on suicide watch when they've now shared an intimate image of themselves and they can't face the reality of going to school and being ridiculed or teased. And so we take this very seriously. It's one small snapshot of what this entire report is, but it speaks to the importance of collaboration and upstream measures to ensure that we're doing the best we can for our youth and our children in our society.
I have a couple of one question and maybe a comment. These clearance rates are not good, and you know that, and we've spoken to that. Do you know if the Big 12, for example, are experiencing similar situations? I assume they are. But I'm just curious as to whether or not clearance rates from the Big 12 would be available for comparison purposes to drive home the point of collaboration. You heard state collaboration, and I just don't see a solution unless collaboration is ratcheted to a level that we haven't seen for a long time. I think within that picture, we also need it from different political jurisdictions. Federal, I look or think about all of these cars that are hitting ports, and I've said before, it's not jewelry or jewelry boxes, it's cars in containers, and it just baffles my mind why they seem to be as successful as they are. And again, without collaboration, port authorities, local police, federal, I just don't see the situation improving. I guess my point is, long question, is can we not, get our hands on clearance rates on a wider spectrum of police services and try to make the point that we really do need help solve some of these situations. I don't think there's any one local police service that's going to do it. We're just chasing the legs of organized crime. And we're not getting near, the more senior or more serious and sophisticated organizations. Sorry for the length of the question. I hope the answer is shorter.
I think the Keith Moore has some information to provide.
Through the chair, the most recent statistics for acquiring clearance rates for the Big 12 is from 2021. And at that point, Halton was the second highest. Most of the others were below 40%. So there has been a decline in Halton, but most of our comparators of the Big 12 are in fact having a worse situation with clearance rates. I'm not sure of the trend, but I'm pretty sure that we remained at the top end for quite some time and remain there at this moment. We won't get 2022 information till July.
But the others must have it in the same way that you do, right? So I'm just wondering if they're not a way to get our hands on it. I really think that we have to make the point to bring this to the attention of other people.
Yeah, just to build on that. Keith, when you're quoting the 2021 stats, is that the weighted clearance rate or the?
That's the crime clearance rate that is in the report.
Is that the weighted clearance rates and weighted crime rates is another thing? I understand why that's not available for 2022 because the stats can that determines that, right?
That's correct. It's stats can that puts the crime clearance rate.
But I think from a public safety point, the weighted part is even more, a better measure. Just like you said, about, you know, it's crimes against people, or dealing with that, and, leveraging the witnesses, and those are typically the crimes that are weighted higher, right, than property crimes.
Chief, and then.
And just adding on to Keith's comments, my estimate is we are still going to be at the top or near the top. We've fallen from, I think it's 48 to 40.5%. And what Keith was just saying is the others were below 40% the year before. Doesn't mean we don't want to be at 48%, but a combination of the increased crimes and the types of crimes and the typical clearance rates of disproportionately between persons crimes and property crimes, the drop is not unexpected to some degree. We'll see how that fares out when those final statistics are available through Stats Canada. I know our frontline members continue to solve and arrest and recover a lot of cars, but there are solutions, to Mr. Allen's point, that are far beyond Halton. For auto theft, the Port of Montreal is key. I believe, and we're lobbying different levels of government to do different things about auto theft. I believe the CBSA and the RCMP have a role to play at the Port of Montreal. I think there's technology that could determine that it's vehicles inside cargo containers. I know the U.S. border certainly can. They look at some trains coming into Canada, but they don't look at anything going out of Canada, so organized crime benefits from that. And I think there's some resources federally that have to be manipulated to address auto theft in Montreal in particular. There's one other thing that, and we are starting to lobby the province of Ontario for legislative change, and this will come through the OACP, and otherwise I've had brief discussions with the Solicitor General and others. In Quebec, they changed the legislation so that if individuals purchase or put aftermarket devices or technology into their vehicles to help prevent auto theft or to recover those vehicles, in Quebec, the insurance companies can give them a rebate on the cost of the insurance. By all accounts, that is not allowable right now in Ontario. It would be through the Minister of Finance that the change has to be made. I think it's a fairly simple one, and maybe things aren't simple sometimes, but if that piece of legislation were changed, there are multiple tags that can be put into vehicles that the accused individuals cannot possibly locate all of them, which would drastically reduce auto theft. Auto theft is very low in Quebec now that they've made those changes. And I think it just makes common sense that we do them here. I just hope it's sooner than later in the case of auto theft.
Well, actually, do you mind if I go to Lisa, and then we'll come back to you. Second speaker, Lisa, and then now.
Thanks very much. Just want to really underscore that collaboration, upstream prevention, and I'm going to also add the education for all the different concerns that we've raised today. My understanding is that previous statistics would have been based more within a geographic boundary, as we know. So a local crime is committed, local clearance rate. Maybe this goes back to that broader discussion we have to have about the advocacy. We've heard you touch on that again today. Are we finding that more and more of the source of these crimes are happening outside of our borders, and that was by way of the ability to lay charges or to clear those? We can't do it, because how would you ever be able to charge someone in one of the countries you've noted that is the source of probably a web of these statistics that we have here? Can you talk about that?
I think that's true in auto theft in particular. It's people from Quebec that are coming here to steal the vehicles. By and large, all of the arrests that we've made have been people from Quebec stealing Ontario cars. So that's not a leap of faith. That's what's happening. When it comes to the cyber aspect, and as Roger mentioned earlier, it's happening in 2 or 3 primary countries and hidden behind technology. That is a bigger picture. There is an organization here now that I've shared some information from NC3, which is a national cybercrime unit that's been just stood up probably 2 to 3 years ago. That try to coordinate some of the information around cyber, but I think there's a national investigative need for cyber in particular. I don't want to pick on the RCMP, but I'll mention those 4 letters. I think nationally there are some issues, and national and international cyber type of crime being one of them, where it doesn't make sense for 48 police departments in Ontario all trying to track down the same individuals that are attacking people through cyber from around the world. It's a much bigger picture. We could look at different provincial joint force types of things that might have a role to play, but I think it's got to go higher than that. I think there may be changes coming in the future to that national organization, but I'm not sure how quickly they're going to come.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With due respect to our colleagues and the executive, I want to we're not here we cannot provide solutions. We could ask for solutions, and we could ask for more creative ways to look after these issues. So I think if there's anything in the way of something new, I see that staff is demotivated in this whole sense, that the crime is up. And we're not able to, adhere to our original clearance rate. So is there anything that work can do that could support your measures? Or is there something that you are doing that is going to be improving, the situation? Is there anything novel that we should be looking at? Is there a special task force that we need to be building? So I think we don't want to be in a situation where we continue at this level. We want to curb, obviously, this, but we're prepared to support this process. So I'd like to hear from the executive what that would be like.
I think from the board's perspective, a big role that you can play, and are trying to play more and more is around education. So the more times and the more individuals that hear about the types of crimes or the types of victimization that they may realize, such as the cyber messages out to groups. We're putting it out all the time, and we're going to homes for the aged, but putting messages on Twitter are not going to reach the grandparents from the grandparent scam either. So that's why we're also trying to target the youth of the grandparents, who sometimes are caregivers, not necessarily, because lots of people are in their 80s and 90s and functioning and living on their own. So that's not necessarily that their children are going to know. But we need to educate all those levels, and we need to educate the youth on where they're going to fall into harm's way on the internet. The internet's not new anymore, but the attack on some of these people, or the amount of attacks on those individuals trying to extort money, is certainly taking off.
So I think what you see already is we are very much participate in a lot of JFOs because we realize that I'll provide some more information about some ongoing investigations that will more directly answer your question in camera, only because they are ongoing investigations. But we do have quite a few members seconded away now to other bigger projects that involve a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it comes down to our resourcing, where you'll see that we have dedicated units to deal with the most severe crimes, like sexual assault, domestic violence, and that, but we don't have dedicated units necessarily for property crime, per se. So it's where we have to choose to put our resources and where we, from an investigative standpoint, where we focus to get the biggest bang for our buck. And to the point of Mr. Allen, most of these things are happening outside of our jurisdiction. And if we don't go after the biggest targets and try and make the biggest bang, a lot of the stuff we do, we don't look at the smaller players. It's just not where our resources have to go. It's who are the biggest players and how do we go and get them? And we can't do that as an organization by ourselves. We have to partner with other teams who have got different technology that we don't have. There's other services that have technology that we don't have. And we partner with them to get that benefit. So a lot of it is where we're directing our resources, but a lot of it is JFOs.
GFO?
Joint Forces Organized Operations.
JFO, not GFO.
Sorry.
I'd like to add to this as a contribution to this conversation that I mentioned earlier. I think that the board can take a greater role in advocacy to push these initiatives forward. We recently attended the command team, CGO and I recently attended an out-of-staff forum that was put on by the jointly by the appeal board and the appeal service. And it explored this phenomenon of auto theft and have actually come out with 3 strategic priorities, which are actually detailed later in today's agenda. But that kind of advocacy and awareness and bringing not just services together, but boards together, I think really will help drive the message home to senior levels of government, third-party organizations like the Manufacturers Association, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, those sorts of organizations. So it's my goal to talk to you as a board member and to our board about developing some form of advocacy program going forward to talk about these issues and to use our voice to express our concerns. So it's not simply just the same, it's just not the opposite. The sworn folks are coming forward. It's the business leaders and the politicians and, those of us, that serve on boards across Ontario. We need to speak up and make sure our voice is heard, not just at the government level, but also within our community. So I think that that's something that I think that's an area I'd like to take our board into that more proactive communications role.
Definitely.
Yeah. Jane, I knew I saw your hand go up. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to go back for a second, because when you were talking about Police Day, I've lived here my whole life and I've never heard about it. And the reason I say that is you get 4,000 people that come out. So something that you're doing at the grassroots level, I'm old school, so I love the grassroots, because I think sometimes we always talk about how we can, get out on social media, those kind of things. Now, I'm not 80, but I'm saying over Christmas time because of, when COVID was on, I did a lot of shopping online, which I've never done in my entire life, and I was shocked at how many times I got a UPS saying, we were just at your house, you weren't home, can you tell us your next door neighbor if we can go with his address? Now, I honestly almost fell into that and said my next door neighbor, 672 King Road. And it happened to me 4 different times. One with the Canada Post, you owe $4.95 because we came, da-da-da-da. And I had to literally phone my kids and say, is this a scam? Because I was wondering, did I buy it from the States? Because I bought a lot of stuff for the grandkids over Christmas. So I was just shocked myself, but it was the grassroots talking to other people. It's like what you do with your police day. It's very easy to say, we can get online, we can do all these things, but the reality is people that talk to people, you get more bang from your buck than you do, media-wise or anything else. So I just always want to be mindful that the grassroots is still such a phenomenal place to go.
Absolutely.
Further comments or questions? Kirk, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was coming back to you. I apologize. You might be fine.
I'm going to have to sit further away. I'm still desperate, looking for an answer here. So it sounds right through, I guess. There's so much that I think was on my mind for a topic like this. When we talk about cyber, and unfortunately, cyber has embellished the bottom line of the private sector, while at the same time, the laws I don't think have been very favorable to police action. On top of that, we've fallen into the trap of having political figures tell us year after year, the crime is down, when in fact, if you factored in the cyber, it's actually through the roof. And, you know, some of us know that, and I guess some of us don't, or some of us might not want to believe it. You know, it would seem to me that, you know, the force of the Big 12 has to be heard somewhere. Because, you know, if Halton has lost X amount of cars, plus everything else, then the GTA has lost a ton. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to have impact to drive this forward, because without the collaboration, and collaboration just means people working together. But we're not getting it, I don't think. And are we involved in JFOs? Yes, we're involved in JFOs. We're probably involved in JFOs on a number of fronts. But is there enough of an effort to be involved in JFOs to deal with some of this more serious, more lucrative crime that we're all paying for? Every one of us is paying for it. And so that's my real question, I guess. And now I know clearance rates are going to be part of the answer. Is OACP engaged with Chief? Do you think enough? Can we help? You know, how do we get the collaboration we need?
I know Roger is actually on the executive of the OACP, so you know things that are going on as we speak with the OACP. To your point on auto theft, and the chair and Fred would have heard this at the summit. While we went from 850 to 1,200, Peel was 5,500, and over 27,000 vehicles stolen across the GTA. Hamilton and Niagara were actually slightly down. Well, why is that? We could joke with my friends from those areas, but this is an area where the vehicles that are sought are here more often. And that's not anything to slight any other jurisdictions, but the main part of the GTA is where the new Lexuses and the Rovers and the vehicles that are particularly wanted right now are in higher supply. But from the OACP perspective, Raj?
Through the chair, the importance of coordinated and strategic responses to these types of emerging issues is paramount. Our role at OACP and the executive board is one of advocacy, and not just on behalf of our sector, but looking at, you know, how we partner with the Ministry of Health and the SOLGEN to understand mental health issues, how we get upstream in terms of connections with CBSA and the insurance bureaus and automakers to tackle this auto theft. I think that there's some time in today's session to talk about what that summit looked like and the importance of having the right people. To your specific question, we are finally getting the right stakeholders to the table to drive change. We at the OACP continue to meet with the Solicitor General on a weekly basis, if not a couple of times per week. We've had the opportunity to sit with the Public Safety Minister at a federal level to drive change on bail reform and firearms legislation. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to work with, but not just within our sector, because community safety is a shared responsibility, and there's a number of people that have not been at the table and they haven't been held accountable to share their voice and to share what they can possibly do to maximize the impacts that you're speaking to. So we're very alive to that. I think as a service, you know, when we look at the Big 12, our greatest impact in any criminal enforcement space is always through a coordinated fashion. A Halton win is great, but it's just a small, you know, ripple in a pond. And I think when you look at how we maximize and deploy our resources through joint forces operations and task force, and then partnerships with other agencies like CBSA, that is where we're going to really make our mark. And we need to always just look with that strategic lens because operating in silos just does not work.
I think, I mean, Mr. Chair, I think, you know, there's a big role here for the media as well, which I think is often too quiet in this regard to really help, right? Because, you know, driving this to the level where help is available, I don't see as an impossible job, except that I appreciate it needs to be taken place. 27,000 cars, imagine the value of that. and then we're all paying for it. And that's just a drop in the bucket of probably what's going on nationally.
Sure. And just further to that, I mean, thank you so much to the board for recognizing the 9 officers that have lost their life in the past 7 months. That is also a sign of what's going on in Canada, in society, what's not, where perhaps laws aren't strong enough, particularly at federal levels, to help us. That's where we're doing a lot of lobbying through the OACP and through the CPA to the federal government on bail review, and the provinces have been fantastic with that. The premier, all of the premiers across Ontario have corresponded directly with Minister Mendocino on the bail review issue. The firearms issue with the smuggling of, we are seizing and finding far more firearms than we ever have before. We arrested 3 males being driven around by 1 female to steal cars about 2 months ago. Very amazing investigation and arrest of those individuals. One was armed with a loaded Glock and was wanted for first-degree murder in Quebec already. They've been through the court system a few times. And so when we see this increasing number of firearms and still some resistance, I think there have been some improvements to the resourcing of CBSA at the border, hopefully. It's a big border and and it's very porous, and it's not all land entry. It's drones and all sorts of things now. So, I mean, the deaths of those officers is also an indication of what's happening in different societal trends in the bigger picture. It's not just happening by chance. And my greatest fear is because it's not by chance, it's going to continue. And the Quebec sergeant who lost her life 2 days ago is not going to be the last. So we have great concern. I know that's on the board's radar for today as well, just in brief discussions with the chair, and we're doing everything we can to ensure the level of training of our members. Jeff has some information on that particularly, but you know, the 2 officers in South Simcoe, and not to get off topic, and the 2 officers in Edmonton were completely ambushed in the situation that they walked into, and we can't get to the point where every officer walks into every situation with their handgun drawn. So there is that, de-escalation and calm approach to things that we need, but we also have to have that heightened awareness and concern for our members and by our members for themselves and for each other to be even more cognizant than ever of the risks in policing and the risks of these increased firearms are causing for us.
Satisfied, finally.
No problem. Further comments or questions? So, one comment I have is that we spent a lot of time on this report talking specifically about auto thefts, and the reality is that the statistics are showing alarming trends in many areas. So we need to, be keenly aware of the fact that it's not just a matter of losing our Lexuses or our Land Rovers, it's a matter of an uptick in robberies and assaults and all the other things that we're seeing in these statistics. How are you adapting, and this is to the chief, how are you adapting your operations to zero in on some of these areas? Do you have some examples of how you are reacting to these areas beyond the auto theft piece? More people crimes as opposed to the property crimes?
Certainly, and you took one of my best examples away from me when you said other than auto theft, but because of that trend, we have stood up an internal auto theft team, which has resulted in a number of these arrests and seizures that you've seen. The board is aware of the reformation of the larger and coordinated cyber unit here. Within the police service, it was also a part of the budget to add a staff sergeant to that position. We now know who the staff sergeant is. Thankfully, it's our greatest cyber expert that we have here, who has been doing that position as a sergeant, as an investigator. So you may have examples, Jeff.
Just another example, for example, in intimate partner violence, we obviously have a large team that focuses strictly on that, but it's also, we adjust for the risks that we see. So, for example, as you know, we've partnered with Halton Women's Place, so we have a worker from Halton Women's Place that participates, not just looking at high-risk offenders, but now we actually look at high-risk victims, so that we focus on them to make sure that they're getting taken care of. We also focus, again, obviously, we've created a unit where it's offender management, and they just focus on high-risk offenders, so that they're going on there. So it's adjusting the resources to where the greatest risk is, specifically in the people-centric crimes, and that's how we address those things. And we bring our partners in. For example, again, in IPV and in our sexual assault unit, we have members of CAS embedded and working within their office. We've seen actually in other regions where they have, for example, in Peel, they have like a hub, a separate building, but we actually were one of the very first people that did that. If you go to our IPV unit, we already have quite a few of our partners working in the unit, ready to go when we have to deal with a survivor of IPV. So it's trying to always get that wraparound effect or response to take care of them in every way other than just the investigative component and the preventative part. So that's just an example, especially in the investigative areas where we do, like my earlier comment, where we drop most of our resources are on the greatest risk, the greatest harm. It's putting the people there, and you see that even in our budget process. Now, a lot of the conversation that we have is when we get the resource request, it's where the growing trends are, and that's where people that ask for more investigators, more people, more resources are going, because we're addressing for those trends. So,
Jeff, maybe a little bit on human trafficking. We have our full-time unit, also involvement in the provincial unit as a major crime area these days.
Even for our human trafficking, you've heard me say it before, it's an area that I'm obviously passionate about. We could double our team tomorrow and still keep them busy. We have a member who is a part of a provincial team, so we are going after that organizational or that provincial collaboration component of it, but we also have a dedicated team of 4 that's all they do. And as you've heard me mention in the past, those charges have gone up. And a lot of that is because we're getting better at how we're going out and proactively looking for survivors of human trafficking, and that generates, as a result, more charges, more offenses. The crime is still there. The numbers are still there. We're just getting better at addressing it and prosecuting it, and then, helping our survivors when we have partnerships with Elizabeth Fry, who helps us, take care of victims when we find them. So those are kind of the types of areas that we are putting a lot of focus in and put a ton of time into.
Can I suggest, and perhaps my colleagues would support me with a resolution if this is something that you'd like to see happen. These annual performance reports and some of these statistics really cut to the very core of what we're concerned about, what the community is concerned about. Every time there's a report on increased crime trends, it is the one thing that the local reporters pick up on and report on. But can we going forward, when we see these annual performance reports, can we make sure that they're presented in a discussion format and come with a presentation? So proactively, I think what I would like to see, I'm looking to my board member, my colleagues, if you agree with me, I'd like to see a presentation that talks about the trends, but also talks about the mitigation impact. Because the information you're sharing is great. Like hearing more about how we're dealing with human trafficking and such is wonderful. But if we can get it together in a fulsome report, because I do think that, I do think people are very alive to these issues and fully understanding this is not a Halton problem. I mean, it is a Halton problem because it's a national problem and an international problem, but a report that specifically talks about, the trend and how we're actually impacting, how we are addressing that particular trend. So, human trafficking, this is the problem, this is the increase, and this is how we're going to adjust our resources accordingly. Would that be possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like I said that earlier, it's really core to what we're all about is understanding this and ensuring, because our commitment to the community is to make sure that we provide you folks with the resources and the direction to make sure that we are addressing these core concerns. So, Kurt, did you have a comment?
I did, Mr. Chair. I think we made a resolution a while ago that was to take it out of the consent agenda and put it in the discussion agenda.
Yeah,
sure. I think I remember that. But I am mindful, based on my experience, that we need to be careful what we're talking about in the public session. Yep. When it comes to solutions and what service is doing. So I throw that on the table from the point of view that maybe we need some of this in confidential, that's all.
I think that what I'm looking for is something where the service command table and their support can, determine what is appropriate to be said, because I think that this is such a public issue, and we need to establish confidence amongst our shareholders, our constituents, that these issues are being addressed. Because we talk about them, we talk about the statistics, but we don't actually dig too deeply into some of the areas I think are of most pressing concern. I mean, if you don't own a Lexus or a Land Rover, then probably the auto theft thing isn't that big a deal to you. But knowing that, turning on the news and finding, about the increased level of violence, and almost every day from the United States we're hearing, more school shootings and all those sorts of things, and the police killings, hate crimes, all these things are on an uptick, and I think it's important that we try to address as much as we can in public, but obviously strategically and from a service perspective, obviously there's going to be things we can't. But I'd like to see as much as possible to be in public so that we can provide the community with that assurance that we're actually taking this seriously. We're not just looking at it and saying, oh, those numbers are terrible, let's move on. But that there's actually, and we know that there's action happening. It's a matter of, like Jane was saying earlier, it's communicating to the public what it is we're doing, because it's some great work. Steve?
Yeah, no, and I absolutely agree with that, and it can be done with just sort of whispering from here. But, I mean, every year so far, this report has been a statistical report, which Keith can do, and he does it great every year. You're just asking for a little bit of the operational information behind that, which Keith would have to have some input from some of us, and we can do that, absolutely.
Yeah. So take the problem, create some dialogue and narrative around it, and then also tell us how you're addressing it.
Yeah, but there will also be some things that will be in camera. Absolutely. There's one I've highlighted here already for today, so.
Well, I know you were trying to tell us something earlier, and you couldn't really tell us what it was about, and I get that, and those are important too, and I think the public have to understand that operational, priorities sometimes have to be kept confidential, so we don't let the bad guys know we're up to. But if we could get that, that'd be great. Can I get a motion so we can actually track this on our after retreat? Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm happy to make it for the second time.
I don't remember the first one, but
I don't think it was a resolution.
I don't think we did. I think it was a direction. Yeah, I think it was a direction.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll make it.
For the first time. For the first time. And I heard a seconding. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. So just, Graham, do you have sufficient information on what I was proposing and what we've sort of...
Yep. What I have here is that future...
Let's hear what Graham has, and Fred can add anything.
The future annual police service performance reports include trends and mitigation impacts and a formal presentation to the board.
Wow, way of articulate.
Along with the report as a discussion item.
Yeah.
And something about allowing for a portion of this report and presentation to be in camera. So basically a two-parter, right, Steve? That makes sense?
I think you said this, but I'm just conferring with my colleague for a second. And this would always be a discussion item as opposed to a consent item. Okay. I think you said that, but I wasn't sure if you did or not. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Lisa, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to speak to drafting?
Yeah, I just want to comment to it, not to the drafting, but to the importance of it, because I think that this conversation was a little bit steamrolled by the big issues like the car theft and the cyber and the sexual trafficking and the victims, and when we see these trends upwards of maybe in and around 30%, I want to bring it back to similar to Jane's point. People in our community rely on all of us as a whole and our community partners for that sense of safety. And when we're seeing, like, those are big upticks on a 45-degree angle. And when we are having this discussion, what it's doing is possibly having the ability to erode that sense of safety, which we counter with exactly doing what we're doing today. And I think that's the point I want to drive home, is that we're taking action. We're not just receiving a report, and we're putting in more proactive responses and that thorough conversation back through the community by way of this forum to let them know that, you know, this is a significant priority, because there's some big numbers to look at. It's hard to stare them down.
And part of this is going to be too, we'll be addressing a lot of these things in our upcoming strategic planning process as well. But your point's bang on, and let me just give as an example of this. Sometimes it's just a matter of communicating out what we're doing. And here's the example. So I received, and the chief helped me with this a great deal, I received a scathing email from somebody about the auto theft situation. And there's a lot of that, like, you guys doing nothing about it, and it's happening, and like every car is at risk. And I crafted a response that basically outlined what we are doing about it and what they can do about it. And I got the nicest response that said, this is like fantastic, you guys are great. So it went from being this really like, I feel unsafe, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, to being like, wow, you guys are doing what you can, and I didn't realize the trends were so bad. So I think making sure that we establish that sense of safety and security and put things in perspective too. And so I think that this process will help that. And hopefully our media partners will pick up on it. We can share it out. Councillors can share it out and really start having an impact on the area in the community. So that's a motion that was so brilliantly interpreted by Graham. It's been moved by Kurt and seconded by Nav. Did you want to reread it, since I think we did a little bit tweaking? Yep.
That future annual police service performance reports be presented as discussion items, including trends and mitigation impacts, and a formal presentation to the board, and that portions of the report be presented in confidential session as deemed appropriate.
Well, right. Okay. Is that okay with you, Dan? You're fine with it as a mover? Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're at 11:52.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Could I ask if it might be possible? We have a large number of officers who have been waiting to come in just for one presentation.
I was just about to.
If we could break and go in camera for 15 minutes, so we'd probably deal with that.
You just stole my thunder.
That was my turn.
So, is your wish to go into camera right away on that, or is there's no public portion to that, correct?
Yeah, it would be best if we went into camera right away and get them right in here.
I just want to make sure. So, members of the board, I am looking for a motion to move into a session closed to the public. And we will, at the end of that, just for the public's awareness, if those of you who are watching on YouTube, we will come back into a public session when we're done, probably after lunch. So my guess here is that we're going to do this in-camera presentation. We're going to move to lunch. I'm looking at Stephanie. It's not here yet, so we will pretend to eat. And then we will reconvene probably, I'm going to suggest closer to 1 o'clock. That would be my guess at this point. And if we have a little bit of extra time in camera because we have some time to kill, then we can maybe bang off some of the issues that we have on that agenda as well. So can I get that motion, please? The gold camera. Motion simply to go camera, sorry. Now read it all back to me. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So now your motion moving to go in camera. Okay, and Jane, are you seconding? Thank you very much. All in favor? Okay, we are going to be moving in